Okay, let's go ahead and get started. You ready, Jessica?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you guys all for joining today. Let me stop sharing my screen. I am Elaine Zelby, one of the co-founders of Tofu, and I have an awesome guest with me for our AMA today. We have Jessica Gilmartin, who's currently the CMO of Calendly. Previously, Jessica served as the head of revenue marketing at Asana, also the CMO at Honor, which raised over 250 million from awesome VCs like A16Z, Thrive, Naspers. She was the CMO of Lighthouse AI and also COO of Piazza. She's built and led teams through early go-to-market, hypergrowth, and scale, and has truly touched nearly every aspect of the marketing function. I'm personally really excited to hear how she's built and led marketing teams across not only different industries, but also very different go-to-market motions, and also how she kind of earned her entrepreneurial grit through starting a specialty food business. So welcome, Jessica, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Elaine. Really nice to be here.
I actually wanted to start. So Jessica has built one of my ultimate favorite companies, which was called Fresh Yogurt back in the early 2010s. It was a specialty frozen yogurt shop, but I think you started your career in banking. So how did you go from that to starting a specialty food business?
I mean, I think that's a pretty obvious career path, right? Investment banking to yogurt, it's like the classic path. So I was an investment banker for 4 years and realized that that was just not the right, that's just not where I wanted to go in my career. And I really wanted to operate. I just didn't know what that actually meant. So I ended up going to business school, just kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and fell in love with marketing, and moved to Austin and worked at Dell in marketing for a couple of years. And then my husband and I just had this urge to move out to the Bay Area. And so we moved out here, and I reached out to a good friend of mine from business school and said, "Hey, I'm moving out." And she was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a business. Do you want to start one with me?" And I had absolutely no idea how hard it was to start a business. So I stupidly said yes. And then we just started researching the things that we loved and things we were passionate about. And healthy food was one of them. And I'm very, very passionate about that. And so we just sort of went on this path of looking at where, and it was kind of, which I think is generally what I try to do in my life and my career, is kind of, half intuitive and things that I'm passionate about, and half data driven. And so we looked at things that we loved, and we also looked at where we felt like there was a big opportunity in the market. And yogurt was clearly sort of a hole in the market that we felt like we could serve. And so we went down this path of figuring out how do we create our own homemade yogurt business. We actually built our recipes.
It's all about taking wickets now. Pakistan.
Can you all please mute if you're not speaking? Thank you. I think you're now muted, Jessica. Let me mute you.
Okay, I think I'm back on.
There we go.
Yeah.
All good.
So we built our own yogurt plants. We did everything from scratch. And I think it was massively successful. And I think the reason why is because we did something that nobody else was doing. And we did not listen to the conventional wisdom. So the conventional wisdom, every single solitary expert, every person told us, just get the same mix as everybody else, just do the same thing as everybody else. And we were just like, well, then what's the purpose? If we did the same thing as everybody else did, then why would anybody come to us? And so really what I got from that was this conviction that you kind of have to follow your own intuition, and you have to do something that is really special and unique and differentiated.
I've heard this from multiple people who started businesses in industries where they're not native, that there actually is some benefit to having some naivete and coming into something both with not knowing what to expect or how hard it is, but also just with completely fresh eyes. Do you feel like that was the case for you guys?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if I had known how hard it was to run a retail business, I never, ever would have done it. I mean, I was literally working from 7 a.m. till midnight, 7 days a week, no breaks. And I definitely would not have done that. And just even the process of hiring people and managing people, right? Like managing and hiring an hourly employee is definitely not the same as managing and hiring, a Wharton grad. And so just understanding that complexity and just the dealing with the public and dealing with, things breaking at midnight. It's so much harder than a corporate job. But I never would have done that. And I think that the big thing too is coming in with this questioning attitude, right? So we talked to so many food experts and people that were experts in the industry, and they were like, there's no way that you can just serve yogurt. Like you will never be able to be successful. You have to serve salads. You have to serve soups. You have to do it this way. You can't get the organic food supplier. You have to, get this, like the same one that everybody else does. Because that was just how everybody else does it. And so if you are enmeshed, engrossed in the food business, you just know these are the things you do. Those are checklists. But we were totally naive and had absolutely no idea. And so we're just like, well, why can't you do it? Why can't you do it this way? And we were right. We definitely could have been wrong, but we were right in sort of all of our hypotheses.
And your timing was pretty perfect. It was definitely this hype cycle of frozen yogurt in general, but how did you market it? How did you go about marketing it differently? And I guess, how did that, either differ or is similar to tech marketing?
Yeah. So the funny thing about it is that the only thing that we did, because it took, many, many months to build the store. And so the only thing that we did was we put this really cool and interesting sign, because you kind of have to cover your store window when you're doing construction because you don't want people seeing it. And so we put this really intriguing sign up on the window and people just started yelping about it. At the time, there was no, like Facebook was actually around the corner from us, but it was very, very new. There was no Twitter or that was very new, like social media was kind of new. And so the main thing that people had, like Yelp was massive. And so people just started putting 5-star reviews about us on Yelp just from the sign. And so it just started this intrigue. And then the local newspaper wrote about us and was like, hey, like what is happening? And so we deliberately didn't
I was so
talk about it.
Motivated. There's the end to all this. So
yes. So we deliberately didn't talk about who we were and what we were doing. We kind of wanted to keep the mystique going during this, during the construction process. And so by the time we opened, there was so much pent up interest and excitement about it. And the only thing we really did from a marketing perspective is we went to our neighbors and we sort of told them about it and we offered them early access. So like the people the influencers, basically. So we went to the waiters and waitresses at the nearby restaurants. We went to the hairstylists, the trainers, the people that we knew had access to large amounts of our customers. And we gave them special access so they could see it and they could spread it. But I have to say the number one, we saw this incredibly massive lift from a press perspective. So I'm like a firm believer in PR and the magic of PR, even if you can't quantify it, because every single time we were in a newspaper or a magazine, we would see our sales double, like overnight. And it was just, and it never went down. It was literally unbelievable. Like we'd be in the San Jose Mercury News is a big publication here. We're on the front page of that. We were on the front page of San Francisco Magazine. And it was just like, people would just flock to us as soon as we would get another article.
And did you hire a PR agency or did you do all this on your own?
They came to us. I mean, we were very lucky in that. I think ultimately where I think the lesson for me is if you have a really great differentiated product and you serve your customers really well and you focus on customer service and you focus on your customers having a great experience, and you understand your customers really, really deeply, then like the word will spread because of that. I think it ultimately all came down to us having an extremely clear perspective on our customer base. Like we knew exactly who we were selling to. We had a clear persona in our minds, and every single decision we made was based upon that persona. And I think like that was why it spread, and that's why people loved us so much, is because we just hit the nail on exactly who our persona was.
I was squarely in that demographic. I was your key persona. And I think everything you just said is 1000% true, regardless of what your product or service is. That is ultimately how people are successful, is deeply understanding your customer, deeply understanding your ICP, and really serving them well and figuring out where do they live in the physical and digital world.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing. So I've been in PLG for the past 2 companies at Asana and Calendly. And it's one of the hardest things to do in a PLG company because you have, by definition, a really heterogeneous user base. And so you have people that are coming in from, you'll have the director of sales at a Fortune 500 company, and then you'll have, one of our customers that we just discovered is like they arrange tours for alpacas, and she was trying to figure out how does each alpaca have its own Calendly account, right? So you're like, how do you possibly sell to all of these different users? And I think the most important thing that we discovered at both Asana and Calendly is you have to have the 80-20 rule. So you have to deeply understand, which of the industries and the personas make up 80% of your, not your users, but 80% of your monetizable user base. So who are the people that are actually paying you? And try to create an experience on the website and onboarding that speak to that 80%. And you're not ignoring the 20%, you're just deliberately speaking to the 80%.
And you let the 20% kind of figure out how to map themselves into the product.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because even with 80%, that's still probably quite heterogeneous. And so I found a lot of times with PLG companies, especially at scale, you tend to get these websites that try to have as many solutions, use cases, personas as possible on the site. Is that something you found to be effective of give people the ability to self-serve from the website and identify, this is me, what is the solution you have for me?
Yeah, so I think that to me, the most that you can possibly have is 4 or 5. I just don't think you could possibly have any more than that. And make an experience that people can grok, like, just there's an importance to simplicity on a website, and creating a frictionless experience and just not increasing the cognitive load. And so I generally think that you can hit 4 or 5 personas and 4 or 5 industries at the max, and be able to get to that 80%. So at Calendly, we have sort of 4 major personas, and we've got 3 major industries that we kind of have are in our 80%. And you'll see those pretty specifically on our site. But I think also the onboarding experience is like one of the most important things. And so what I've seen and what the marketing team and the product team usually have to fight over is the level of information that you're asking for people on the onboarding experience. So the product teams want nothing, right? They just want to get people right into their product and using it. But then the problem is that they tend to activate at a much lower rate because you're not giving them the information that they need to be able to understand how they specifically use it, right? Like if I'm a salesperson, I want to understand, how do I set this up with my Google Chrome extension? How do I connect this with Salesforce, with Outreach? And if you're not giving them that experience, they're just gonna leave because they're like, oh, I don't see any value to this. And so asking those questions up front is so incredibly important, because then what we have done is we've created onboarding webinars, nurture emails, a Pendo experience when somebody joins the product, if they are from sales, if they're from recruiting, if they're from customer support, that is unique to them. And we've seen massive increases in activation rates because of that.
How have you aligned the efforts of marketing with the efforts of product in making sure that you are capturing enough information about who this person is and what their unique onboarding experience should be, but then translating that into product?
Yeah, so it ultimately comes from shared data. And so what we have to do is we will have to look at what are the downstream, what are the correlation factors downstream to understand who are the people that are most likely to activate and monetize. And so we spent a lot of time working together on shared dashboards and shared data to say, okay, what information do we need to gather upfront so that we understand whether this person is in a monetizable user group. So that's like the number one most important thing. And then using that data to influence and say, hey, like, let's try this experiment. Let's try this experiment. But it has to come down to, it can't be intuition. It can't be like a fight, right? It has to be, hey, we have this data that shows that if we know that someone's a salesperson and we give them these 3 things, they will monetize better. And then that helps the product team, because what they care about is activation and monetization too.
What tools are you guys using today to do that qualification and segmentation?
So it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about this. I think over the past few years, we got like very into enrichment tools, and everyone kind of fell in love with enrichment tools and moved completely away from questions. And I think that was a big mistake. I think we all realized that, because enrichment tools are pretty flawed. Like, I think the best case scenario is maybe it's like 40% right. And especially now with people working from home, you can't really figure out, like, you could have the VP at a Fortune 500 company working from home and you have no idea. And so just the enrichment tools are just not as good as they used to be. And so I think we're moving much more towards questions. And even if that increases the friction and reduces the sign up rate or whatever rate, it doesn't matter to us. If it's like a 5% reduction in someone filling out a form, but we get twice as much information or 3 times as much information as accurate, it's totally worth it. So I'd say we're moving much more towards, people filling out forms. We use Braze for our nurturing or for our lifecycle emails, and we use a new tool that's actually amazing, Goldcast, I think it's called. And we've moved all of our webinars to onboarding webinars to Goldcast, and that has been like game changing for us. And then we use Pendo in the product.
It's interesting. I used to always talk about this, the dream is a parallel funnel. It's truly like somebody that comes in the top just continues to convert through every single stage all the way to active and retained user. And it kind of sounds like what you're describing is a way to potentially take a little bit from the top, but make it such that at each stage, how to get them to go to the next stage and how to actually convert them and push them through. So it feels like you're not necessarily, the end numbers are not necessarily going to go down. It might just be the super top of funnel numbers in terms of adding that extra friction with questions.
Yeah. So I could not care less about top of the funnel numbers. Like I don't care about signups. I don't care about leads. That's to me, that is a vanity metric. What I care about is the people that are paying us and using it. And so one of the things actually that we did at Calendly, so Calendly has, in my opinion, the most incredibly viral motion that I've ever seen. It is astonishing, and I would not have believed it until I came here and saw the numbers. It is astonishing, the virality of the product and how efficient our PLG motion is. The challenge that we had is that so many people who, I'm sure most of you have used Calendly or have received a Calendly invitation, and we made it really prominent when somebody sort of accepted a meeting invite. So imagine that you received a meeting invite from somebody, a Calendly user. We made it really prominent and easy for somebody to then sign up to be a Calendly user. The problem is that a very, very significant portion of the people that signed up thought that they had to sign up for Calendly because in order to complete the meeting.
Oh, interesting.
Right? They're like, oh, okay, I have to sign up for Calendly in order to take the meeting. And so we had a very low activation rate for those users. And we're like, well, we're wasting all of this time, and it's not a great experience for the people that are wrongly signing up, trying to convert them because they didn't want to sign up, right? They just wanted to take a meeting. And so we made this decision to completely cut off all of those false signups. We totally changed the UI. We made it much more clear what you were signing up for and made it sort of, we gated the sign up process. And so we saw the number of signups, significantly decrease, but these were much higher quality signups and better for the customer, better for us. And then from a marketing perspective, we're doing a lot of really interesting things now around retargeting those signups to say, hey, like maybe you had a great experience signing up. Maybe you're interested in learning more about Calendly. And we found that to be really interesting and successful. So basically not having people sign up in that moment, but creating opportunities for them to learn more about Calendly. So then they go to our website to sign up with more information. And that's been very, very successful for us.
It makes a lot of sense too, because at the point when they're getting the calendar invite for the first time, they don't know what the experience is going to be like. But after they've actually had the experience, completed the meeting, done everything, then at least they have a concept of what this is, what this does. And it feels like that's the time to then say, no, you could do this too.
Yes, exactly. Like in the moment you're accepting a meeting, you don't want, especially if you're on your cell phone, you're not going to sign up and go through a whole onboarding experience. Our big thing is let's try to get you to a desktop where you can actually sign up and have the real experience.
Have there been any learnings since you've been at the company this year around any shift in who your ICP is or any focus in terms of trying to capture new audiences, especially as the company is really scaled?
Yeah, so two particular industries that we notice we have really, really strong product market fit and we do very well in is financial services and education, which is interesting because that has not necessarily been the case at previous companies. And so I think that that's kind of the fascinating thing is that even in PLG companies that may be similar or look similar, you still have all of these nuances. Like that was definitely not the case at Asana. That was not who we sold to primarily. But it's just because which of course makes sense, like financial services, you've got wealth advisors and insurance advisors who are constantly doing meetings. You're like, okay, obviously that, but you have to have a story for them and you have to understand their needs, and they have a million security things, right? You got to work through. And so I think that that's the hard part too, is then you have to have this really strong relationship between sales, marketing, and product, where you're like, okay, we're seeing product market fit here. We're seeing a lot of demand. They have a set of very specific needs that may be different from these other heterogeneous groups. Are we willing to invest because we believe there's opportunity here? And so getting the product team on board to maybe put in a bunch of enterprise security features that don't make sense for the folks that are that have alpacas, right? You're like, how do you then balance that? So I think that that's the hard part of, like, you can identify these areas, but then it has to be an investment from sales and marketing and product at the same time.
For companies who are earlier in their journey but are taking a PLG approach, from a marketing perspective, do you recommend that they go broad at first and try to then use data to inform who they're seeing product market fit with? Or do you recommend people do kind of more segmented tests against people in smaller chunks and then double down on the ones that are working?
Yeah, definitely go wide, if only because it's so much more expensive to try to do segmented, tailored top of funnel. So if you were to try to, like, specifically target a certain size, certain industry, certain persona, your cost of acquisition is going to be quadruple, quintuple, and it's just the math. You just don't have the scale to make that math work. So I'd suggest going really, really broad and really wide with a more generic message, because you are still in the early stages, and really the goal at this point is just volume and learning. And then once you have better data, and the important thing there is connecting your top of funnel all the way through your revenue, which is hard, but it's incredibly important. So once you've done that, and once you kind of say, okay, we're seeing these certain types of people are monetizing more, then you can use that information to sort of feed the Google algorithms, to feed the Facebook algorithms, to really help you then make it less expensive and more cost effective.
Do you have a rule of thumb as to when something is working? Like, what is enough data to kind of prove a thesis that, yes, let's go and double down on this segment because it seems like they're monetizing better?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like, hey, what's your ROAS? If your ROAS is more than one, like, great. keep
Totally. One other question I'm very curious about. So the last few experiences you've had have been at companies that have both a PLG and a sales-led motion. And how, from a marketing perspective, do you see those two things work together in parallel? Where is there friction points? Any things that you've learned over the last few experiences?
So I kind of always say that having PLG and SLG is basically like having two marketing teams. Yeah. It truly is. Like, you have to have two completely, you have to have two budgets. You have to have two different sets of capabilities. And so it's really hard, and it's like 10 times harder than just trying to do one versus the other. I think the most important thing, and when I joined Calendly, I only joined in January, the big challenge I had to overcome was the team historically had really thought of the PLG funnel and SLG funnel competing with each other. And it was actually the same thing at Asana, interestingly enough. Most people felt like it was competing and cannibalization, and they would say things like SLG versus PLG. And that is one of the worst mistakes that you could make. And I just see it over and over again. The SLG funnel is 100% driven by the PLG funnel. That is just the reality of these businesses. They are messy and interconnected and intertwined. And so you can't think of it as either or. The way that I think about it is one customer journey. And what we're doing is we are allowing the customer to make the right decision for them at the right time. So there are going to be some customers that choose to sign up and use the product and then decide on their own to expand and then want to talk to a salesperson. There are some customers that sign up for the product, and we will spend a lot of time trying to identify those customers that are using the product and love it and can expand. And so we will try to reach out to them to try to get them to talk to a salesperson. And there are some customers who come to the website usually because their colleague is using it, or they've heard about it, or they receive, in our case, they've received an invite and they want to talk to a salesperson because they would like to, start with a larger deal. But all of these things are connected and intertwined. And what we have also found is that people that sign up for Calendly are much more likely to close deals and close larger deals with us. And so getting everybody into the product and using the product is better. And so to me, there's not this idea of like leads versus signups. It's leads and signups. It's but we just need teams that are thinking about different parts of the funnel. So you need a team that understands more enterprise marketing and can work with the sales team to create the presentations and the competitive analyses, and people that can also do great work on the website. Separately, you need people that can do nurture emails and onboarding webinars and understand PQLs. So you just kind of need to mix and match all the different capabilities, but they have to work together and they have to have shared goals.
Is the structure of your team at Calendly set up so that there's two distinct teams that still work together, or is it all one team?
I guess probably the major area would be like we do have a growth team that they are focused primarily on website and lifecycle. So I would say that that's the only team that is more focused on PLG, but every other team, we're set up very, very typically. We have like demand gen, we've got product and solution marketing, we've got brands, we've got comms. Every other team, they are mixed goals between the PLG and SLG. And I think that to me, that's really important.
I had a firsthand look at this because when I joined Slack, I was the first marketer hired on the enterprise side when they were launching an enterprise product. And it was a very interesting experience having an entire consumer facing, very PLG focused team, and then a sales team, and then trying to bridge marketing across these two different motions. It's a messy and tricky thing, to your point. But I think as companies scale, it's something that's also a necessity.
It is. And the worst part is the data, because the data never lives in the same place, especially usually, which like if somebody is out there who wants to build something, build an email system that can do both SLG and PLG. Like, I don't understand why we have to use Marketo and Braze or Marketo and Iterable, or it's so bizarre to me because they work completely differently. And so you have all of your emails, like you have all of your customer information in two different email systems that don't talk to each other or work together. It drives me crazy.
Or three, because you have Outreach, SalesLoft, or other SDR tools, then you have sales tools, then you have marketing tools. So
that's good point. And don't forget, you've got product notification emails.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, so 4. Good point.
I made the joke over the last decade, there was this whole unbundling of SaaS, and I will argue that marketing and sales were two of the worst offenders in terms of buying every point solution that solved one really, really good purpose. Yeah. And I kept making the joke of like, bring back SAP. And I didn't literally mean that, but I meant something that kind of was the monolithic solution that does a little bit of everything and does the 80-20 rule. So 80% of it does well, 20% not so great. There are some values to that. And I'm seeing a swing back in terms of leaders wanting fewer tools that do more. Is that something that you're also seeing from your peers?
I don't think so, because
really?
Like Salesforce is trying to do that. Like clearly that's what Salesforce is doing, right? With the marketing cloud and all that stuff. But you're like, it's hard to sort of say, there's value in it, but it's hard to like when you were asking your head of demand gen to make a decision about a marketing tool and they evaluate something that is 80% there, and they're like, oh, but it doesn't have this thing. And so it's just, I think you have to have a CMO, you have to have somebody that is like, I'm willing to accept every tool being not great because I need this, and kind of ignoring what your like line leaders are telling you, right? Like if I tried to implement one tool to rule them all, but made everybody unhappy, like I just don't think my team would love me very much if I did that. And I kind of need to give each of my team leads the autonomy to make the tool choice that's best for them and that will fit their needs. And it could be very different. Maybe it's different at like large enterprises. I talk mainly with folks that are kind of at my level in terms of size. I think all of us are just like, no, whatever works the best. Like I've got to let my team do it.
It makes sense. I will tell you as a data point, I probably talked to you well over 300 CMO CROs over the last few months. And of those 300 conversations, guess how many people are on Pardot, which is Salesforce Marketing Cloud?
I'm guessing
1.
Yeah.
Literally 1. It's very evenly split from marketing automation. 500 employees and above are typically on Marketo. 500 and below are typically on HubSpot. Yes. And then every now and then you get a few other things sprinkled in, but it's It's a good point, but it causes a lot of data problems and write-offs problems and things like that.
The other interesting thing which I did not appreciate is that because I came from enterprise marketing, and so like you have this very clean Salesforce database, like all everything is in there. It's the source of truth. That's not the case in PLG. Like a teeny percentage of your companies and your users and customers are in Salesforce, and the rest of them lives in some other kind of database. And so just the mixing and matching of the data and who are you talking to and who are top prospects, and then also just this idea that there may be 200 different people at Amazon that are using Calendly, but they're all spread across, like they're individual users, and we have no understanding that they are all in Amazon and how they relate to each other. They're not in Salesforce usually. So it's just super messy. And like that just makes it really much harder to market and to sell so these larger deals, and try to figure out how to package all these individual users together in a way that's just, you don't see in enterprise marketing, because it's like there's one dude at Amazon or one woman at Amazon you got to go after. And it's like very simple and easy. You just go after them. It's not the case.
One of the guests just asked a question related to this, and you started to touch on it, but where are the problems most acute in managing customer data across these different applications? And has it caused any massive problems for the business?
Yeah, it's so hard. Yeah, data is I would say data is the number one Achilles heel of like hybrid PLG SLG businesses for that reason, because the way if you are trying to create sort of a seed land expand motion, if you're just trying to create a really high velocity PLG motion, then you have your one user database and you've got your one marketing tool and it's easy. But if you are trying to understand how do I look for patterns, signals in a user group, and figure out how do I extract that to understand who should I most go after, who should the sales team go after, that's incredibly hard. We actually started using 6sense, and that's been really helpful for us. So we're using 6sense not only as an intent tool for new customers, but we're looking to say, hey, of our existing users and our existing customers, who do we think are most likely to be potential expansion customers, and then we're doing more marketing to them to get them to fill out a lead form to get them to sales. We've just started doing it, and that's actually been reasonably successful.
Have they surfaced any specific signals that have proven to be true, meaning people that fit this description or do this in the product or X, Y, or Z are much more likely to convert to, sales deals?
Yeah, that's not what they do. We've tried to use other tools. We've tried to use 2 other tools for that, and it just is not successful.
Can you please mute? There we go. That to me feels like a panacea that people have been wanting for a very long time, but yet I've still never seen anything that actually works for that specific use case.
We have implemented 2 very expensive and very painful to implement tools, and it just hasn't worked. I think the right answer is you've got to have a really strong data science team, and you have to have a strong relationship with them. I think that's I've kind of come to the conclusion that's the path to success, is internal and not external.
That makes sense. Actually, that brings up a point. You had recently written a LinkedIn post that I thought was very interesting, somewhat controversial, and somewhat different than how I've ever thought about this. But you had said there were 3 underhyped areas within marketing in terms of team members. One of them was the analytics team, which we kind of just covered. But the other 2 were project management and solutions marketing. Mm-hmm. So maybe talk through a little bit of what you meant by that. And I'm in particular really curious to know what solutions marketing means at a company that is PLG.
Yes. So I had never had good project managers before. I just never had a project management function before. And I'm like, oh my God, now I know what I'm missing. and we just couldn't get things launched on time, and everything was very chaotic. And then now that I have 2 amazing project managers, I was like, okay, now I understand what they do, because they're not just shepherding, they're not just sitting. So we use Asana, of course, and I love it, and I could never imagine life without it. But, they're not just shepherding things through Asana, but they are actually helping us think through, like, what are the potential blockers in campaigns? Like where are they're looking around corners and they're saying, okay, we are launching this big campaign, this big project, this big initiative. How are we setting ourselves up for success? How are we making sure all the right people are in the room in the beginning? How are we, how are we thinking about different things that could, the approval processes that we need and the collaboration that we need. Just they're kind of always thinking 2 steps ahead, so that when we, which, you've done this for, many years, like there are always things that happen in campaigns that break down, right? You're like, oh, I forgot we were supposed to internationalize this, or, oh, I forgot that the product person was supposed to look at this, or who's supposed to be responsible for this? It's just, there's so many issues that come that create frustration and delays and poor decision-making, and having a project manager that's just proactively thinking about all these things just removes all of that. And so we just have this really smooth, seamless process for campaigns that I just have never experienced before. They also manage our OKR process, our goal process, in a way that like I used to have to do it. And so I'm super happy that I don't do that anymore. So they're amazing. Then on the solutions marketing side, when I joined, they were very focused on key personas and industries for our sales team. And I've actually moved them about 80% now to focus on the PLG side. So now that we have moved towards persona-based onboarding, they've created really amazing webinars for sales teams, for recruiting teams, for financial services, so that the second you enter the product, you have a very tailored experience. They also work with our lifecycle team to create really personalized onboarding experience. So all the first nurture emails are not generic anymore. They talk to a salesperson, they talk to a recruiter in their language. They understand these personas more than anybody else. And so they just can speak to their needs in a way that like nobody else can. The other thing that they do is they're responsible for the web pages. And so, just having that deep understanding of we call it jobs to be done, just makes such a difference versus just talking generically about the product.
Are the solution marketers, are they under PMM? Are they their own standalone team? How does that work?
We have a head of solutions marketing that reports to our head of product and solution marketing. So we've got basically our head of product marketing has a head of solutions marketing, and she has solution marketers under her. And then he also has PMMs and customer marketing.
Got it. That role makes a ton of sense to me. I haven't heard it described like that before, but I think it actually makes a ton of sense to have dedicated people on that. One question on the project managers. If you were going to go and hire that for the first time, what would be the skill sets that you'd be looking for that would be like, yes, this person is going to be a great marketing project manager?
So I think anybody that obviously just has to be really, really organized, love process, love procedure, but I think also really wants to deeply understand the campaign process. So they have to be customer centric. Right, because you don't want a project manager who just is the Department of No, which I've definitely seen, and also dogmatically follows all the rules and procedures. You have to have somebody that's really intellectually curious, wants to ask a lot of questions, wants to understand what people are doing, why people are doing it, and sort of has a thirst to make everything better and more seamless.
Makes sense. That does feel like a very useful role to grease the wheels and make sure all the trains are moving on time in the same direction and people are coordinated.
Yeah, it is totally undersung. It's the total undersung heroes of marketing.
Yeah, I've not actually worked with them before, so I will. I'll keep that as a note for when we grow big. One last area I just wanted to get your take on is there are now, there's been this new wave of generative AI technologies that are very much targeting marketing, sales, go-to-market teams. Have you guys adopted anything yet at Calendly? I know you guys are working on it for your own product and launching things there, but how about for the marketing team?
We have tried a lot of them. I would say that the overwhelming feeling is meh. So I talk a lot about this, and it's, to me, AI is like going to be very evolutionary and not revolutionary. I think that we are at the absolute peak of the AI hype cycle, and we're at, if that's number 10, we're at like 2 of the actual usability of it. I think the challenge we have with the AI tools, we've tried a bunch of them, is that they are designed to pump out very generic content. Like by definition, literally by definition, what generative AI does is it just takes a bunch of stuff that other people have written and tries to smush them together and create something. So, my team, we have really high standards for our content, and so it never meets the mark. I'd say where I like generative AI and where I like it is to create a consistent tone across the team. So like, I definitely do not want my content writers using it, and they do not like it. But there's a lot of people that write content at a company who are not professional writers. And so I really like this idea that we can use generative AI to create a consistent tone and make sure that that tone is okay. Because, you know, when you have product marketers that are writing content, you've got demand gen writing content, it's kind of like a Wild West. And the tone can be all off. And these tools can really be helpful in helping us create something that is brand consistent.
I could not agree with you more. And we've been saying since day one that if you let AI write your stuff from scratch, it is A, going to be crap, but B, if you and I both put in at two different companies the exact same prompts to the same system, we're going to get the same outputs because it's just predicting the next best word, next best sentence. And then everyone's stuff is going to sound exactly the same. And the way you stand out as a marketer is differentiation, you know, having a nuanced perspective, all of that. And so where we've seen it be impactful for people is, to your point, making sure that you're translating, take the people who are really good at writing and really good at thinking through what are our differentiators, what is our tone, what is our message going to be, and then repurposing it to stuff like SDR sequences. Like SDR is not the best at writing emails.
Yes.
Maybe social media people, maybe not the best at writing copy, but they need to go and translate it to native copy on your social channels or ad channels or things like that. So we've seen people have some success, I will say, with repurposing content where there's still human generated content at the core. And that's where the creativity comes in, the content marketing comes in, but the repetitive nature of turning it into other stuff doesn't need to be done by humans.
I'm a big fan of helping salespeople write better because that, you know, that's just, we all listen, we're all marketers. We all face what it is like to have to see some really horrendous sales emails. And they're not writers, like I get it. And so helping create a consistent tone and also helping to see what are some of the trends, what are some of the things that are working or not, and scaling that totally makes sense to me.
One of the guests asked whether you guys have actually adopted a tool to help with that tone consistency yet, or if you're still testing things.
What are we using? I think we're using writer.ai.
Yep.
We tried a bunch of them, but I think that's the one that we settled on.
That makes sense. I think they've done a good job on the enterprise side too, of really targeting almost that Grammarly type thing, but for tone and brand consistency.
Yeah, and we're using Genie on the sales side.
Oh, cool. I will check that one out.
Yeah.
One last question from me before we wrap things up today. If you could wave a magic wand and have one kind of like magic tool that you've always been wanting, what is that? Is there something that's been a pain point throughout your career that you're like, somebody please solve this?
It's totally the thing I said before around the email systems. I want one email system for products, for nurture emails, for lifecycle emails, and sales emails. That is my magical tool.
I love that. And I've never heard of anybody building that. So if I come across it, I will definitely let you know.
Perfect.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jessica. Learned a ton. Excited to continue to follow your career, and hopefully we will chat again soon.
Thank you. Great questions. Appreciate it.
And thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you next time.